It's actually not a question, it's more a general comment on this debate about identity and citizenship. I would like to give, if that's okay with you, the French perspective, because it's a very different one from what we have in Spain or even Switzerland. In France, we have a very strong and sometimes very painful history of centralization and of curbing and taming individual identity. And it's been done through, as I said, a very old process of centralization, a very harsh process of language and cultural uniformization and secularization, to the point that, very paradoxically, nowadays, secularism and laity has almost become a religious to some of us French people. But that's a different debate. I would like to come back to what Ramon said. You have an identity crisis when you want to reduce your identity to something specific, and I completely agree with that. I would like to remind the fact that back in 2007 in France, actually the government established a very peculiar thing called the Ministry of Immigration and National Identity. That was something that was very surprising and that actually didn't last because it was suppressed 3 years after. And to me, it's really the sign of something that goes really wrong in the way we consider national identity. As soon as we consider that there are foreign bodies, as soon as we consider that someone should not be part of the national body because of its religious belief, religious belonging, or ethnical belonging, then we have an identity problem. And it also relates to something that one of the participants said, that identity should be different from citizenship. That's it.
Thank you. I think that we only talk about an identity crisis when you actually want to have one. I think we should look in countries like with a long history like Iraq, and Spain probably is another good example. Spain was probably the first unified country in Europe in the 15th century. And it was a union of kingdoms, so it was basically an extremely diverse country in which identity was not equal to loyalty to the state. I think the big problem you actually face is when you equal identity to loyalty. Then you need to eliminate or reduce anybody who has a different identity, because they are not loyal to whatever you want to build. So Spain never had a problem with loyalty in that diversity. Only when the creation of the national state brought the question of, should we build a national identity? And then is when Franco took that to the limit and tried to eliminate any identity that would not fit its political project. Iraq is a country of multiple identities. And that doesn't need to be a problem. The same way in Spain, when the political transition came, it was based on the diversity of identities, of languages. I come from a region that his mother tongue is not Spanish. My father came from another different region. I lived in another different capital. I never found that a problem to adapt because of the political framework in which loyalty to the state or to a social country. Look at the Ottoman example. The Ottoman example for 500 years was one of the most stable political entities, and it was in absolute diversity. That did not interfere with loyalty to the ruler. In this case, it was the ruler. You can replace that for the loyalty to a social contract or agreement on a social contract. So I think you only have a national country, let's say an identity crisis when you want to reduce yourself to one identity that excludes all the others. That is a problem. I like very much the psychological approach that identity in the country could be equal to the identity in the individual. But it happens exactly the same. when you want to reduce your identity, then you have an internal crisis with yourself, because you have to exclude anything that doesn't fit. In a country, it's exactly the same. You have to exclude anybody who does not fit in your sense of national identity.
Thank you very much. It's difficult for me now, the transition to my circle of reality, because I never experienced war in my own country. When I was born, my country was divided, and we had two different opposing systems, and we had like a historic heritage because of the war that our grandfathers were in. So for me, identity, German identity is difficult, so that's true. I also have a sub-identity, and that's my Bavarian identity, and an Uber-identity, that is European identity. And maybe that's the reason why in my work I was always wondering, what is it that holds a society together? And during my expeditions to like very remote areas, for example, the outsider community of our the outside of our international community, North Korea, or a remote tribe in the Andaman Sea, or an enclave like a sect in Chile, or the private kingdom of a Congolese warlord, I could, of course, observe that they have the same language, they have the same religion, they have the same laws. But it was a very homogeneous behavior, and diversity was a threat to their communities. And the element that was the strongest element for their identity was that they distinct themselves against the others. So they were building mental borders. And when I come home to Europe, I always wonder, because I see 27 countries who were in war with each other for centuries, who do not speak all the same language. They have different religious views, they have different political views, they have different traditions and code of behavior. And so I was always wondering how they are creating their identity. And my observation is that they have this shared values, so that wrongdoing is displayed, perpetrators will held accountable, and that minorities are secured. And I think, this is, the citizenship is not only a privilege, but it's also a duty. And I think this is the common sense that no matter where I'm in, if I'm in Spain, in Italy, or in France, or in Bavaria, a person's freedoms ends where another person's freedom begins.
It has been said that it's not only about one national identity, it's about different identities. Every one of us has different identities. A very important question is, what do they refer to? Generally, they refer to certain regions. Now, you have a religious identity, a language identity, a political identity concerning the, let's say, the political borders. Now, if you compare two countries, Belgium and Switzerland, there is one difference, and that is important for the difficulty for the development of a national identity in Belgium, and it's easier for us in Switzerland. That is the fact that the borders to where identities refer coincide or do not coincide. I have here a map of Belgium, and the fact is that below you have the languages. It's French and Dutch. And here the political division of the country. And the border is exactly the same. And that is important, because all those, they identify through the language and through their adherence to the political identity, exactly the same. And it's more difficult to develop based on this a national identity. In Switzerland, we have 4 languages, and we have above all 2 religions. Actually, it's more important for the culture, Catholic and Protestant. I'm from Zurich. My political identity is Zurich. However, I'm from a Catholic family, and I feel closer to Catholics outside of Zurich, because the border between the Catholics and the Protestants do not coincide with the political borders. The same with the languages. We have different cantons in Switzerland where they speak German and French. The German-speaking people there feel sometimes closer to other German people in other cantons. The same with the French. So, in other words, if you have clear borders for all identities and they coincide, it's more difficult to develop a national identity as if everything is mixed. I feel closer, for instance, political identity. I'm of the Socialist Party. I feel closer to a socialist in the French part of Switzerland than to a right-wing politician in Zurich. So the best is you mix it up.
In Germany, we don't use the term political class. This term doesn't exist in our newspapers, in our common talk. Political class, very, very rarely, maybe in universities we use it. And I think there is a reason for this. The political class, or people that are professional in politics, are coming from various parts of the society. We have had heads of, or not heads of state, but heads of parties, and we have had heads of ministries who did not even have a university degree. This is something I think you've never had in Iraq. We had a head of a party who was a mechanic. He was working in an automotive factory, and he was the representative of the unions, and he became the head of the Social Democratic Party. For a long time, the political class was in the hands of the citizen. But since recently, people become more skeptical of the professional politicians. They accuse the professional politicians of only pursuing their interests and of being disconnected from the people. And this has led to some sort of a crisis of trust between the politicians and the citizen. And there are some populist parties that are using this crisis of trust, of course, for their own benefit, and they present themselves as the authentic representatives of the people. And they say, we are not politicians. We are not the political class. We are an alternative. We represent the people. The problem is, they enter the political business and they become part of the political class, part of the political system. And when you ask a citizen, like, okay, when you run for office and you want to become a member of parliament, will you be a member of the political class? The citizen can only answer, yes, of course, I am a member of the political class. I cannot disconnect myself from this world. I'm a politician, I'm a professional politician. And this is something that we always need to bear in mind. When we discuss the political class and we accuse the political class of this and this and this and that, we always have to bear in mind to what extent are we ourselves part of the political class? To what extent do we aspire to become part of the political class? Because if we reject the political class abstractly, you said, okay, the political class is not legitimate, then who is going to represent the people? Those that represent the people and that enter a system will become members of the political class. There is no alternative to this. And therefore, I know that, especially in the Middle Eastern democracies, for example, Iraq, also Lebanon, the political class has a very, very bad image. But let's always be fair and keep in mind that one day, those that criticize the political class will be part of the political class. We had the Green Party movement in the 1980s, who were the alternative to the political system. They said, we are against the system. Now they might win the elections in Germany. We might have maybe a young woman, 40 years old, from the Green Party, become the next Chancellor of Germany. It is possible. So if you ask people 20 years ago, could you imagine that this party is going to rule Germany one day? Everyone would laugh. They would say, no, they are an alternative. They are not the political class. But they have become the political class much more than probably anyone else. So we have to live with the political class. And that's it.